Let's talk about Brett Yormark in the Big 12, because he also talked about this expansion thing. I'm really surprised that he went out on a limb like this, because I've told you in our reporting, they're not talking to anybody about expansion. I don't have any reason to think that that's changed. It's been a week or so since I talked to people in the Big 12. You know, there's no indication that they are actively pursuing universities to join their league. Their conferences, they talk to other commissioners. I continue to tell you, these commissioners, especially in the Power Four, are not rivals. They are business partners. They know that. They talk all the time. So I was a little surprised to hear Brett Yormark so openly talking about expansion.
Expansion isn't something that's on my radar right now for obvious reasons. But listen, this is an evolving landscape, collegiate athletics, and we always have to be ready. So I can't sit here and say we'll be 16 for the next 10 years. It'll all depend on the nuances in and around the Big 12. But I love 16.
Are you surprised he said that?
I mean, I think that Brett Yormark has always been a guy that wants to take a definitive stance on, you know, expansion or any type of business with the Big 12. So I'm not necessarily surprised he said that. I think, you know, again, he wants to basically say, hey, we're not looking at expansion right now, but that doesn't mean we're closed off to the conversation. You know, he's also saying he really likes the makeup of the conference with 16 teams and, you know, where the conference is going. And I have to agree. I think 16 for the Big 12 is a nice number. You know, it's not too big. It's not too small. It's that nice kind of median, you know, number that allows them to progress forward without having the responsibility of having 20 members in their conference or whatever. So, you know, I'm not necessarily surprised, but, you know, usually when commissioners get asked these kind of questions, there is some, you know, something in their answer they're looking to put out there. And all I feel like he was putting out there is that they're not closed off to it, but it's not something that they're actively kind of engaged in right now.
Yeah, I think 16 is the right number. I continue to tell you, the people that we talk to on a regular basis on this show, nobody wants to surpass that 20 massive membership number. It's tough. When you get past really 18 is pretty doable for writing a schedule. When you're into the 20s, it is really difficult to write a schedule for all of those sports. Not just football and basketball, but all sports. Think about how arduous that is and how difficult it is to align that. I think the revenue models don't support currently going into the 20s, especially if you're the ACC and the Big 12, who are so far behind financially. I think you're asking for trouble when you get too big at this point in this current economic structure. But I'm surprised that Brett Yormark is so openly talking about where they're at 16 and that he has no desire to expand. I am surprised by that. And I think when we look at who the Big 12 is, Brett Yormark is not a guy that's afraid to say things. He's not a guy that's afraid of the media or struggles to talk to the media like certain athletic directors, you know, north of Tijuana and south of, I don't know, Carlsbad. But my point is, I think Brett Yormark is very good and very polished as an administrator. I think he wants it known that they are focused on making money right now. And we've heard that. They have their TV contract in place. They are focused on building their basketball division. They are focused on making sure that they are driving as much revenue as possible through their football programs. I'm surprised he is bluntly saying we are not expanding now. I am surprised by that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, it's a situation too where, you know, there's so much going on in college football, or in college athletics, I should say, not just football, but in athletics, where, you know, you've got the House settlement, you've got the whole ACC thing that just went down, you know, you've got the thing out west with the Pac-12 and the Mountain West, and then you've got the Big 12 kind of sitting in the middle of everything, geographically speaking. And they're sitting here saying, yeah, you know, our conference is really strong. You know, we are in a really reliable place. And there's not any impetus to expand. And I think that's really kind of the point that he was trying to hammer home, but he didn't explicitly say, is that at this time, there's not like this thing that's pushing us to expand. And when you consider all the conversations around, you know, the Super League / new entity, that's, being bandied about and talked about. Like Brett Yormark is in those conversations, like
Mhm.
obviously. So I just think that now, because of the Super League thing or the new entity, whatever it's going to be called, there's definitely not a reason to have major change happening in your conference. There's every reason to be really strong, focus on success, focus on making money, stockpile money,
Yeah.
and really get yourself in this really fortified position. So that way, when the Super League comes along, you can execute. And I think that's what he's trying to say if you read between the
Well,
lines.
I also thought it was interesting yesterday that there's a question out there, and Dennis Dodd's the one who lit this fuse, but Dennis Dodd saying that not all P5 teams have opted in, or not all power conference teams have opted in to the house settlement and rev sharing. They're all automatically opted in.
Yeah.
They are, as a power conference member, you are automatically opted in. So it's not like there's a question about that. It's all of this continuing conversation about how unstable college football is.
Yeah.
Instability, unstable, whatever it is. There's a lot of that talk. And I do think Brett Yormark knows who he is, because I think he also said that, hey, we know who we are, and yeah, we're the best basketball brand in the country.
Listen, you've heard me say it before, we are the best men's basketball conference in America. No doubt about it. And when you look at the historicals over the last 5 to 10 years, follow the data. It speaks for itself.
I don't disagree with him. I think they're the best basketball conference in the country. Are all of their teams playing good basketball? Not right now. They're not. Who's playing the best basketball? Very clearly the SEC. I don't think there's even a question about that. But I do think top to bottom, your best basketball league in the country is the Big 12.
Right.
And you look at the parity in the league, you look at the competition for recruiting in this league, look at what BYU's doing. I would expect BYU to be a top 10 team in the country next year, with the Bansa and the talent that the Bansa's allowed them to go after, the money they have to go after that talent. I would expect BYU to be an elite program next year. I would expect Utah basketball to be significantly better. I would expect the bottom teams in this league, and even the mid-table teams that are struggling, Kansas, West Virginia, like, excuse me, I would expect those teams to be significantly better next year. And I would expect this conference to be a significantly better basketball conference a year from now.
Yeah, and I think they just got to get the job done in the tournament. I mean, I don't disagree that you're the best basketball conference in the country overall, but the reality of the situation is you haven't executed in the tournament, and so you're not realizing those tournament shares that you really should be. And we'll look to see. I mean, obviously, we've talked so much on the show about how the SEC dominated last year's tournament, and got a ton of shares and made a lot of money, and that's what the Big 12 needs to do. We can't have a situation where you get, let's call it 8 teams or 10 teams in, but only 2 of them make a deep run. You really need 5 or 6 of those teams to get to the Sweet 16 and really pick up a couple of shares each. That way the conference can continue to thrive and continue to keep that momentum in football, because I do feel like football parlayed momentum into basketball.
I agree.
Year. Like the ASU performance against Texas, like everyone was talking about that. You had obviously several different storylines going in. Like Iowa State's a great example. Iowa State was contending for the Big 12 until the last couple of weeks there, and then some things changed, and now they're competing in basketball. So I'm just my point is that the Big 12 just needs to find a way to win some of these playoff games so they can make some money.
Well, and I also think this house settlement thing has to come to an end. I mean, this feels now like it's taking too long. It's hanging over college athletics, but the smart programs, the smart conferences, they've already planned for it. They're already executing it, in fact. And I think that's what you have to do. This is not a small amount of money.
Right.
We're talking about billions of dollars, and I don't care who you are. It's a lot of money. And I think the right thing to do is to focus on building your business, as you said. And it should not be about expansion. But I'm going to just keep saying what I keep telling you guys. Arizona State basketball cannot be this shitty for perpetuity.
Agreed.
Like, you have got to win games. And I look at UCF, Cincinnati, Utah down in this league. So Utah, Cincinnati, UCF, Oklahoma State. I don't know what it's going to take for Oak State to get off of their collective rears, their arse,
Right.
and win some athletic endeavors. Like you cannot be this bad in football and basketball and think that you're going to be competitive. You're setting yourself back probably 3 years at a time in football. And then when your basketball team piles on top of that with a dynamic 15-17 season, you're setting yourself back for 5 years.
Yeah.
Because you can't recruit on that. You can't tell me you're building branding dollars. Like, this conference too often finds itself on the wrong side of wins and losses. And it's why, frankly, in football, and I'm trying not to be so, Danny Downer, but in football, does this Big 12 conference have a brand?
Not right now. No.
I think I could make the argument, again, BYU's the best athletic department in this league. And we need to start acknowledging that and talking about it. BYU is the best athletic department in this league. And why am I saying that so emphatically? Because it's a problem. It's a problem that you go and you look at the football standings in this league. Oklahoma State cannot be a winless team.
Right.
That is crippling to this league. Utah cannot have the terrible season they had. You can't have Arizona being 2-7 in the Big 12.
Terrible.
Like, you look at the nameplates at the bottom of this league. Joey McGuire cannot be an 8-5 football team this year. Joey McGuire's got to compete for a Big 12 championship this season.
100%.
Baylor cannot continue to be mediocre in everything athletically. In your revenue generating sports like basketball and football, Baylor is strictly average. Can't be. You can't be terrible like Utah football was and Utah basketball was. You can't be terrible like Oak State has been. You can't be mid like so many teams in this league are.
And then cry a river about how you're not successful. Like that's what we see in the Big 12 is, hey, we didn't win anything. And now all of our fans are crying a river about how bad we are. And, now we're going to spin the narrative about why we cut dude's salary or fired this guy or that guy or whatever it might be. And I think ultimately, again, as I always say, like, winning helps you win off the field. So if you win on the football field, you're going to help yourself win off the football field with recruiting. And that's going to help you win back on the field again. And I just think that the Big 12, I always hesitate like questioning people's motives or like what they prioritize at the highest level. But there are times in the Big 12, especially in football, but now in basketball, where it's like, man, I'm looking at your program and I'm like, dude, like what is the highest priority? Because if it's not winning, I don't know why you're doing this. And
again, I go to Utah as an example. You completely clean house on the offensive side of the football. You completely cleaned out the basketball program. You fired the coach mid-season.
Yeah.
I mean, if you start looking at what's going on in Utah athletics, when your team at Utah is losing, you're held to account for that. You are held to account for that. Can you say the same thing at Baylor? Can you say the same thing at Oak State? I don't think you can.
No.
Can you say the same thing at Houston? Well, Houston's moving in the right direction in football, and they're dominant in basketball. Can you say the same thing at BYU? You don't have to, because they're dominant at football and they're dominant in basketball. How is it possible that two of the newest members of this league are the best brands in the conference right now?
Oh, I know, because the Pac-12 was one of the best athletic conferences in the country, and it just had awful leadership. And now we're seeing that play out.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to watch going forward. But today is a big day. BYU has got to win today. BYU, this is a huge day for KY and the BYU basketball program. And Iowa State is nothing to be overlooked or trifled.
Nope.
And I think when we look at this tournament today, I probably would lean Iowa State. I would probably lean Iowa State. I think Duke, Georgia Tech, this is a huge moment for Duke basketball. You cannot lose this game. There are games today across college basketball that are just really important.
Yeah, well, I think for Cooper Flag, it's time to start showing out, right? It's time to start showing in a big game you can be that guy, and I think he'll do that for sure. I mean, I would expect him to do that. I think for BYU, my biggest concern is how you start this game. There's no question you should win it, you can win it, like no question. But if you come out and you're down, they go on a 15-0 run to start the game, 10-0 run to start the game.
Don't do it.
That's going to tell me everything I need to know. I would
Duke
fully,
is 22.5 points.
yeah, I mean, I would fully expect BYU to be prepared and to be ready for Iowa State, but we'll see what happens. That's the thing about college basketball is you never know. You really
Huge
never
day.
know. Yeah.
Huge day. BYU, 3.5 point dog at 146.5 points. Huge day.
Yeah.
I think this one right here was big for the ACC. Because if North Carolina doesn't get into the tournament, there's no way to spit shine a turd. That's damaging to the ACC. And North Carolina is not close to done. Let's be honest with it. They're not. I think if it all ended today, North Carolina is not in the tournament.
Right.
And I think when you look at Carolina, Wake Forest at 12:30, UNC's a 5.5 point favorite in that game. And it is a huge game. I think it is a really big game. RJ Davis, you just heard I took him in Prize Picks today. I think he's got to shine out. And I'm really curious because I think SMU, Clemson, Louisville, I mean, that's a good win for Stanford over Cal yesterday. I don't think does Stanford get in?
Probably not.
I think that's tough, dude. Like if I look at Lenardi this morning, I was looking at he's still got Texas as the first team out right now today. And Texas won last night.
Yeah.
He's still got him out. He's got San Diego State, Indiana, Xavier, and Carolina now as the last four in. He's got Colorado. Boise State is still on the outside looking in. Ohio State and Texas are all out, those four. Boise State, Colorado State, Ohio State, Texas, all out. He's also got Wake. So I'm telling you, the winner of the Wake North Carolina game is probably in, and the
That's
loser's
one of the
probably
biggest
out.
games today.
I
Most
think
on the line game.
I think there's no doubt about that. Villanova. How about Villanova? That like massive. And so he's got the ones as Duke, Auburn,
Yeah, Duke is Duke.
Houston, and Florida. That's who Lenardi's got as his top four. And I think it's going to be tight. Texas is another one, folks, that if you're not paying attention to Texas right now,
Right.
Texas, I don't think Texas has to run the table. Let's not get carried away with it.
But they need to write a positive story. They need to show that they are legitimate, that they are good, that they are quality. I don't think that it's just automatic for them.
Arkansas and Ole Miss is a huge game. That's 11 o'clock on the SEC network. Texas and A&M, they're not beating A&M. A&M's a really good basketball team.
Yeah.
But if you're the SEC, aren't you pulling for Texas?
Yes.
Because A&M's in no matter what. If you're the SEC, don't you want Texas in the tournament?
Yes, you do.
If you are the SEC, which way do you go on Kentucky and Oklahoma? Because Oklahoma's not in right now, I don't think. At 20-12, that was a huge win. Can you really tell me that without question, Oklahoma's in?
No, you can't.
I think, and this is what's great about this is what's great about the NCAA tournament. Because it is going to be, I don't know, we'll see.
They're just playing for a lot today, and that's what makes the games great.
You know what, Eric and Raleigh, I think you're probably right. And again, I tend to take my emotions out of sports when we're talking about how crappy Marcus Freeman is as a coach in big games. I think North Carolina is probably an NIT team. That's the team. If North Carolina gets in the tournament, I think they can win 2, maybe 3 games.
Facts.
I don't know that I can see them. I don't know that.
Yeah, you can't.
I don't know the answer to the question because the ACC. I don't know was the ACC a good league this year? Clearly, it was not. This is a down year for the ACC. It's not a crappy league. Don't get over the top with it. ACC basketball fan always loses their mind. It was a down year. I would expect Duke to be a 30-win team this year.
Right.
I would expect North Carolina to beat Wake Forest. You are better than
How
you
many
are
wins
better
does
than
UNC
Wake.
have?
Both of them 21. They're 21-12. And
See, I think if you beat Wake Forest, you're in. I think that
I think that's probably true.
If you're a blue blood in your low 20s right now and you can win today, you're probably in.
That's probably true.
But like again, if you're a smaller school, a Cinderella, and you're only at 20 wins, let's say, then I think you're probably not.
How many SEC teams are getting in? That's going to be the interesting thing.
Well, the
'cause
projection since before all these tournaments started was 14. That's what, like,
Lunardi's got 13.
yeah.
And if Texas somehow wins, that'd be 14 teams.
Yeah.
The Big Ten, I think the Big Ten's locked at 9. The Big 12 should be 9. The Big East should be 4. And the ACC should be 4. The biggest question to me is, what about the Mountain West? Like, is Boise really not going to make the tournament? I mean, they've got the biggest problem for the Mountain West is it's Boise and San Diego State.
Yes.
And the loser of that game very well might not get in.
And by the way, I do want to point out one more thing before we just leave the house settlement stuff behind for basketball tournament stuff as it pertains to the Pac-12. A lot of people said, hey, in the house settlement, the Pac-12 is a defendant, and that means that they automatically are into rev sharing, right?
I don't think is that true?
The Pac-12, because this rev sharing suit came out before the Pac-12 was dissolved. So the Pac-12's problem
Well,
right
that's
now
true. Very true.
and Ross had this yesterday, talking all about it, is that the Pac-12 schools are automatically into revenue
so
sharing.
Oregon State and Washington State.
Yes, are into automatic rev sharing, but are not. The Pac-12 as a conference is not designated as a power conference at this
The
time.
new Pac-12 is
Yeah,
not.
the new
Washington State and Oregon State are because of the old Pac-12.
Yes.
Okay, that
Yes.
makes sense.
Yes.
Thinking
And
through
so-
that makes sense.
And so the question becomes, just while we're talking about, the new Pac-12 teams here, the Mountain West teams, is for Washington State and Oregon State, what do you do about that? Because again, I just don't see, I don't, that's where the unknown gray area comes in.
But did you